Welcome to Mikon's Hardware. I think I am live now. I have reinstalled my system, so now I'm using Windows 11, thus I had to do all my setup all over again, and I'm not sure if I screwed up my OBS settings. Also, I have got AMD RX 6900 XT graphics card instead of my Titan V, so I'm using AMD encoder instead of NVIDIA encoder. Thus, if there are some issues with my video or audio, please let me know in the comments, because, as I said, everything is new. Encoder is new, Windows is new, and I have also done some adjustments to my microphone. So please, if you have any issues, let me know. Otherwise, we will start with AliExpress deals for 2021 Q4. I see some comments coming up, and people are slowly getting up into the stream. Right before I have started the stream, it was about 30 people waiting, but right now it's just 21 watching. So it means that someone has not yet clicked the play button, or someone decided to leave, not sure. Well, if everything is working fine, we can go into the AliExpress deals. And if you find some better deals that I didn't find on AliExpress, feel free to add the links into the chat. I hope YouTube will not remove these links. We will look at them. You can also text me on Discord if you're interested, and I will try to answer online. So, first of all, as always, I need to say it explicitly, because people are always trying to accuse me for trying to sell them something from AliExpress because the sellers are paying me. No, AliExpress sellers are not paying me. I don't have any deals with AliExpress, and I'm not associated with them in any way. Everything I am gonna tell here is just my personal opinion, and I try to position myself in such a situation. For example, if I don't have any other shops but AliExpress, what would I buy from AliExpress? And this is what I'm picking, and this is what I'm gonna show here. But if you would like to support my work, feel free to use my affiliated links, which I am also going to add into the presentation. The next one is, AliExpress is not a safe place for shopping. It is very sad that many people in many countries don't have any other options but use AliExpress, but unfortunately AliExpress is not a safe place to do shopping. There are many dishonest sellers, and sometimes it is more complicated to actually send a defective item back to China than simply buy a new one. So, what can I say? Just be aware of this fact and try to avoid all the stores which have less than 90% positive feedback. Be very careful with the stores which have less than 95% positive feedback. And always record videos of unboxing your AliExpress packages, and always take high resolution pictures after you have done the unboxing video. Sometimes some tiny details such as socket pins are not possible to catch on the video, and you need a high resolution picture to at least check for yourself, was it you, a sloppy one, who broke the socket, or the socket came to you in a broken state out of the box. With that in mind, let's start with some best budget or ultra budget builds, how to build your computer with AliExpress stuff. Probably I have to say that if you have some decent options on your local market, I always recommend to prioritize your local market, buy from your local stores, maybe buy from your second hand, and only then go to AliExpress. But in case, if you don't have anything of that and you need to buy from AliExpress, or the local prices are like horribly bad, then AliExpress is the last resort, and here for ultra budget configuration, we get our good old X79. Let me see if I have anything in the chat. So I'm actually deciding on getting an X99 F8 with 32 gigs and a E52696 v3, so I came for some education here. We are gonna get to X99 a bit later on, but first it is X79. In my previous video, I have done a comparison between E5-1650 and the E5-2640 v3, and E5-2640 v3 simply trashed 1650 even if 1650 is overclocked. But the situation has changed right now. The X99 combos are a bit up in price, X79 combos are a bit down in price, and the price gap is rather significant. If you need to save every last penny to buy a graphics card or maybe a larger SSD, then LGA 2011 and X79 is still a viable option. Let's see what we can have here. So, Machinist X79 is the motherboard which I would recommend to buy, and I can open the link here and take a look. So this is the motherboard which I would buy for myself. Right now they are asking for it 80 euros, which is kind of unreasonable, and actually this is this is very reasonable. I thought they have updated the listing because this is motherboard, CPU and 8 gigs of memory. They are charging a little bit more than others because this is Machinist brand, but the motherboard is not Machinist. They have just slapped a Machinist heatsink over here, and that's it. Also over here you can see what happens if you buy this combo using my affiliated link. In that case, AliExpress is going to pay me about 6 euros. In reality, I'm not gonna get 6 euros, maybe I will get like 3, 4, because they do currency conversion from Chinese yuan to USD dollars and then USD dollars to the Swedish crowns, and on this currency conversion I'm losing lots of money. Then there is AliExpress fee, there is my local bank fee, and then there are taxes and all blah 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 blah. But anyway, AliExpress promises to pay me somewhere around 6 euros if you buy this combo from my link. Why I'm saying that this is a little bit overpriced? Because they are giving this package only with 2 4 gig sticks. If we look at the same package, which is the same Machinist X79 same combo but with 16 gigs from another seller, we see that it's exactly the same motherboard, just from another seller which has slightly less positive feedback, and they are providing same thing but with 16 gigs of memory for 89.97 after the discount. So this is what Chinese sellers are doing. They're first growing up reputation and then trying to sell stuff for a bit more expensive. And I remember that Machinist official store had reputation more than 97%, now it's down to 96.3%. Anyway, this is the motherboard that I would personally buy myself if I would need an ultra budget X79 combination. There is one more option, it is this Clisre X79 6C. I have not tested this motherboard myself, but checking online, it is supposed to be exactly the same motherboard as X79 the BIOS is compatible, but the looks is different. I cannot recommend it because I have not tested it myself, but online people say it's the same motherboard, so feel free to buy, but don't blame me if something goes up. Like, I do think that this black one looks much better than this vomiting green, but I have not tested it, so I can't say much. And here we can see that for about 84 euros, we're getting the same E5-2650 v2 and 16 gigs of DDR3 memory, which is rather good. And in this particular case, there is no affiliated link, so AliExpress would pay me 0 if you follow this link and buy this motherboard. Let me see if I get some questions. What languages do I speak? I speak Ukrainian, English, Russian, Chinese, and some Swedish. I have a Huananzhi X99 F8 and Xeon E5-2620 v3, but I don't know which CPU to choose to replace the current one. In your case, I would go with E5-2660 v3, 2666 v3, or E5-2690 v3. I was thinking about 2660 v3. Is that a good frequency? Yes, exactly. Yes, I think 2660 v3 is a good option. With the imminent launch of 12th gen budget CPU by Intel, it is really viable to purchase the obsolete server CPU, given the significant inferior single-threaded performance. Okay, I think the person is trying to say that Intel is soon gonna launch budget-friendly 12th gen Core i5 CPUs, and those ones are gonna be much better. Yes, but the problem is that the motherboards are still very expensive, and we don't even have good prices for the 10th gen. Anyway, so these are the options that I would recommend for the ultra budget X79 build. Of course, there are different alternatives. You can also look at EFI2689, EFI2670, and EFI2667 V2. For 2689 and 2667 V2, you need a better motherboard with better VRM, and for 2670 V2, you can slap it on exactly the same Machinist X79. Fine, closing these ones and going to slightly less budget LGA 2011 version 3 X99. Just waiting for the mutants part. Yeah. Mutants part is coming a little bit later. So, as the same as with the X79, with X99, I strongly suggest to avoid expensive motherboards. It makes no sense to pay more than 100 euros for an X99 motherboard from China. For Swedish money, it's going to be 1,000 Swedish kronor, that's why I said 1,000. The same goes for the memory. Do not buy expensive DDR3 memory from AliExpress, because if you're buying DDR3 2133, most likely you're getting DDR3 1333 just flashed as DDR3 2133. And for ultra cheap DDR4 memory, which comes with 4 or 8 gigs capacity, that one has tendency to be incompatible with Chinese X99 motherboards, thus you have to always check with the seller if it is compatible or not compatible. From the options that I would pick for myself, let's start with a well-known one, which is Machinist X99 RS9, comes with EFI2620 V3 and 16 gigs of memory. The memory is also red, which looks nice, and in this case, the seller guarantees compatibility between memory and the motherboard. For this combination, after discount, they are asking just under 130 euros, which is not bad, but it is about 40 euros more than what we were getting for X79 combo. And this 40 euros might be a big difference when you're buying the graphics card. The next one, which I personally prefer, will be Huawei X99. This one, I think the motherboard looks pretty bad. I don't like when it is blue because it's hard to match with every other component. Nevertheless, we are getting motherboard with EFI2640 V3 instead of 2620 V3 and ECC registered memory from Samsung. This is much better configuration, especially if you keep in mind that Huawei X99S has better VRAM than Machinist X99. So for about the same price, just a bit more, 140 euros instead of 130 euros, you're getting 2 extra cores, better memory and better VRAM. So if you can afford this 10 extra euros, I would go with the Huawei, and of course if you don't mind the ugly blue color. One more option that I found is this Clisre X99B5. It is this one. I have not tested this motherboard myself, but it looks exactly like Machinist and Huawei, so most likely the BIOS will be compatible. You just use BIOS for Huananzhi X99 8MF, and you get exactly same things. You get 2 USB 3 at the backside, 4 USB 2, PS2, network configuration, and basic audio. So this is asking 125 euros for a combination of EFI2640 V3 and 16 gigs of memory. So price-wise, this is the best option. From Clisre official store, which has not bad reviews, but the motherboard was not tested by me, thus I can't guarantee that you take it and make it, but seems to be a good option. Have you seen World War III, the game? I have seen it, but I have not played it. I bought the Xeon EFI2630 LV3. Is that a good processor? Well, it really depends on what are you gonna use it for and how much you paid for it. I would say there are no bad processors, there are only processors with bad price. Except of AMD FX series, but luckily FX series is long gone. Why are the E5 1600 V3 series are still so expensive? For two reasons. First, because people keep buying it at this expensive price, and second, It is much fewer items available to sell of 1600 series compared to 2600 series, and Chinese just want to keep stock. Or at least that's what I have seen. 1650 V3 and 1660 V3 are pretty expensive. Yes, these CPUs can be overclocked, and many people believe that since they can overclock them, they will get a much better gaming experience. They are overpaying for this CPU and then plugging in GTX 1050 Ti and bashing their head why their FPS is much worse than those who bought E5 2689 and GTX 1060. So it is what it is. Are X79 6-core budget Xeon V2 processors still better than a Xeon E3 2040 V2 in CPU-heavy games, or is that the extra cores won't matter because of the old architecture? Well, first of all, these two V2 Xeons would be pretty much identical in terms of architecture, and if you're gonna get any use from the extra cores really depends on what games you're gonna use and what graphics card you have. If you have something like GTX 950, then it's not gonna make any difference. But if you have a GTX, let's say 1070, there might be a difference. Do you think EFI 2623 V4 processor will run games smoothly in HD resolution? Depends which game, depends which graphics card, but in general, no, I don't think so. Привіт зі Львова, використовую Ryzen 5000 серії, але Xeon при наявності відеокарти теж хороша річ для економії. It was a Ukrainian message from my Ukrainian subscriber. Okay, let's do like this. If you're asking questions which are supposed to be answered by me, please add me, because I'm getting lost in the comments and you don't want to watch the stream me reading your comment. So if there is a question addressed to me, please add me and I will answer it. Meanwhile, we're gonna move on. So from the alternatives, EFI 2660 V3 and 2666, 2690, X99 BD4 and X99 D4 Titanium can be also considered. This motherboard is not the best motherboard. It comes with horrible BIOS, but there is a better BIOS available online, and so far it also has one of the best VRM options. No overclocking is possible, sadly, but the rest seems to be working fine except of the sleep mode on the motherboard. So if you need a motherboard for a bit more power-hungry CPU, this one is the way to go. But again, paying 90 euros for Chinese X99 motherboard, I would probably skip doing that. Exactly the same applies to this Huananzhi X99 BD4 motherboard. Sleep mode works though, and the original BIOS is slightly better. Like, it is a good BIOS, but it doesn't have RAM timings adjustment, so you still need to flash it. It has only 2 PCI-Express X16 slots compared to this one, which has 3. From the CPUs, if you badly want a 12-core Xeon, then 2690 V3 is kinda a good option right now. 2666 V3, I would say, is one of the best value options at the moment. Around at 50-55 euros, you're getting 10 cores with a turbo frequency up to 3.5 GHz, which is really nice. And the other one is 2660 V3, the same 10 cores, but the turbo frequency up to 3.3 GHz, but the price is also slightly less. So these are the X99 Xeons I would take a look at if I would be assembling a system for myself. Let's close all of these down and move on. Now it starts the interesting part, the LGA 1151 mutants. But before that, I need to read the chat. Do you recommend Huananzhi X99 F8 anymore? I have not yet tested the latest version of X99 F8. I know for sure that the motherboard does not support the previous BIOS. They have done some changes. And BIOS engineer has already made a new BIOS option for it. I have ordered the motherboard. When it comes to me, I will test it and I will tell if I still recommend it or no. Do you recommend a dual X79 to run multiple VMs on a workstation? No, I don't recommend that unless you are really tight on the budget. If you want to cheap out on DDR3 memory, then you better buy Huananzhi X99 TAD motherboard, which is dual socket X99 and supports DDR3 memory. I would do it that way, but in general, I don't recommend X79 and I also don't recommend dual socket. Hello, I have around 400 euros to spend on an AliExpress Xeon CPU motherboard RAM combo. By the way, I wanna play 1080p, 240 Hz. Well, then it is completely stupid. If you have 400 euros to spend on motherboard, CPU and RAM, why the heck would you buy Xeon? Just do yourself a favor. Buy, for example, Core i5-10400F B560 motherboard and fast DDR3 memory. You don't have to do that on AliExpress if you have 400 euros. i7-3770 for 60 euros or E3 1230 38 euros, a better deal than buying a 2650 V2 with board for 80 euros. Oh, no, I don't think that i7-3770 for 60 euros is a good purchase, and I also don't think that 2630 for 38 euros is a good purchase, unless you already have a good motherboard and you already have memory. Because, at least in my case, for me, buying Z77 and Z67 motherboards is a real pain, and on the cheaper motherboards, these CPUs do not support memory overclocking, and you will be stuck to DDR3 1333 or DDR3 1600, which is pretty bad. Any SATA expansion card you recommend from AliExpress? No, unfortunately I have not tested a single one, thus I cannot recommend anything, so SATA expansion cards would be on your own. So, budget LGA 1151 mutants. First, we need to take a look at a few possible options, and I need to explain. Okay, so this one has a lid. Let me see if I can find one which doesn't have a lid. For example, this one. Yes, so mutants are available in two configurations. One is without a lid, like this one. Let me see. Yes, here are bigger pictures. So the CPU die or CPU crystal is available for direct cooling with your CPU cooler. You have to be careful with what cooler you mount, because if you have cooler with the heat pipes or not even surface, it may damage your crystal. But the heat dissipation from such CPU is way much better compared to CPUs with such Chinese-made IHS. This IHS itself might not be that bad, and you can also easily remove it and replace thermal paste underneath there with something more adequate. But the problem is that very often they're making it of a round shape, and that this thing is slightly lower than the LGA 1151 socket. In that case, the pressure is not enough between the CPU cooler and the CPU to transfer the heat, and the heat is trapped into the CPU, and it's simply impossible to cool it down. Thus, as a general rule, I would avoid all CPUs with high TDP and a custom-made Chinese IHS. If you're picking up something like QTJ1 or QTJ0 with 8 hyper-threaded cores and you plan to overclock it, do yourself a favor and get this one which has a naked crystal. And again, you don't need to buy expensive DDR4 memory for these mutants, because most of them are maxing out at DDR4 2800. Some of you might be lucky and get something like DDR4 3000, maybe DDR4 3200, but most of these mutants have a limitation of about DDR4 2666, 2700, 2800. And even though it is kind of modern Intel 14nm CPUs, these CPUs tend to consume lots of power, and they can be bottlenecked by your motherboard, or even your motherboard VRM may burn out. So pay extra attention to that if you plan to do overclocking or install a 6-8 core CPUs into weak motherboards. Let's see if I have more questions. Can you recommend a dual X99 motherboard from AliExpress if money is not a problem and quality is a must? No. If money is not a problem and quality is a must, then you do not buy X99 at all. You buy LGA 3647 and maybe buy an engineering sample Xeon Gold CPU from AliExpress. So for 1151 mutants, we start with QNCT or QNVH. This is a 6-core CPU which has maximum turbo frequency of 3.6 GHz and all-core turbo frequency is 3.3 GHz. I have just finished tested this CPU and really badly wanted to make a comparison with the QL2X, which is unlocked quad-core CPU, but unfortunately I just can't make that QL2X work. So QNCT will be tested and compared against EFI2640v3. This QNCT or QNVH are basically the same CPU, just different name. Right now available for about 60 euros. In my case, I also need to pay something for shipping. In your case, it might be free delivery, but this is a perfect CPU for very cheap and budget-oriented 1151 motherboards. The next option that I would buy for myself is QTJ2. It performs roughly equal to i5-10400. And if you remove power restrictions, it will work at about 4 GHz on all cores under load. And by the way, these mutants also come with Ultra HD graphics, so if you cannot afford buying a graphics card straight away, you can sit on the integrated graphics. For QTJ2, which is 6-core, 12-thread CPU, they are asking about 90 euros. Here we can see that it's 80 euros plus shipping, so around 90 euros. If you will have to pay extra VAT taxes when your package arrives to you, the price is about the same as 10400F, but if you can avoid paying taxes, then this is a good deal, especially if you can find a cheap B365 or Z370 motherboard. And the last CPU I would be personally looking at is QTJ1 or QTJ0. And this is this one, which I have already shown. So we are getting basically Core i9 9900K performance for just about 140 euros with shipping. This CPU requires a very strong motherboard with a very strong VRM, otherwise it's gonna suffer or choke itself because the power is not enough. So closing this one down, and let's take a look at motherboard options. So from the motherboards, I have personally tested MSI Z370A Pro. I have tested multiple of these motherboards. All of them worked flawlessly with all mutants I have tested, and you can get one on AliExpress for about 90 euros. Here, most of the used motherboards are sold on AliExpress from stores with not very high positive feedback. Thus, there is always a chance that you're gonna get some problems with this motherboard. And if you have an option to buy a B365 motherboard from your local stores, you better do that. For example, ASRock B365 motherboards can often be found for even cheaper than this, at least here in Sweden, but I don't know how it works for you. Anyway, this Z370A Pro I would buy if I would be hunting for a motherboard from AliExpress. Did you try Z170 board for that QL2X? I have tried QL2X on my Z370 motherboard and it worked with no issues, but unfortunately I had to get this motherboard to a customer and I am only left with ASRock B365, and on this motherboard it simply refuses to start. Do mutants support Z170 boards with DDR3 slots? Yes, they do. I cannot guarantee that QTJ would work with the DDR3, but QNCT and QL2X definitely work with the DDR3 memory. And by the way, QTJ2 and QNCT are locked, while QTJ1 and QTJ0 are unlocked and you can overclock them. So another option is this Gigabyte B365 Aorus Elite. I have also tested this motherboard. I have tested it with locked and unlocked CPUs. In general, it is okay, no issues detected. The plus of this motherboard is that you can attempt to flash modified BIOS without Flash Programmer using the Gigabyte flashing tool. I cannot guarantee you that it's gonna work because some people reported that it worked for them, others reported that it didn't work. Maybe it depends on which BIOS is currently installed on the motherboard. Anyway, the problem of this Gigabyte B365 board is that it does not have power consumption limitations settings in the BIOS. For example, I was not able to unrestrict my QTJ2 to be able to consume as much power as it wants, thus it was throttling itself to about 3.5-3.3 GHz, but I could do that with Intel X2U. Sadly, the BIOS settings were not available, so just need to know about this limitation. Let's see if there are more questions. My QTJ0 works fine with the Z170, Z270, but didn't want on B365M Pro. Are you talking about ASRock B365M Pro? Because I have tested this motherboard with QTJ1 and it worked with no issues. Maybe you didn't correctly flush the BIOS. Any special update maintenance recommended for motherboard Huananzhi X99 TF with the Xeon FI2678 with 3? I have seen every time I try to update Windows, the process just stops. I would recommend to reinstall Windows if that's the case. And special maintenance, no, I don't think that any special maintenance is needed, but what you can do, you can check if the VRM radiator is still sitting tight on your motherboard and the motherboard is not overheating. Other than that, I don't think you need to do anything extra. So, from alternatives for LGA1151 mutants, we have this QQLT, which is very similar to QTJ2, but it is unlocked, and its default configuration is not as good as QTJ2, but you can overclock it to be better than QTJ2. But you need to bother with overclocking, you need to bother with power consumption, and it also costs a bit more. Personally, for myself, I would pick QTJ2, slap it in, remove power consumption restrictions, and just enjoy. The other option is this interesting i7-8750H. I don't know if this CPU is locked or unlocked, but what I can say for sure that it is not engineering sample. So even if this CPU is unlocked, you will not be able to overclock it on B365 motherboards. Also, some people are very much triggered if they see such things as Intel CPU 0000. So for those who are triggered with this, you can buy this Intel Core i7-8750H. Basically the same CPU, not sure if it's locked or unlocked, but it is a final retail version for laptops and not an engineering sample. What else I have here collected? Oh yeah, I got this Asus that 370 and one more gigabyte. Yes, this is the same motherboard I have already mentioned, but from another seller, which has pretty bad score. Or it is right on the edge, but the price is slightly less. So if you're willing to risk, you can buy it. Otherwise, don't do that. And this Asus Prime, I have also tested multiple Asus motherboards. I had Asus Prime Z370 Plus without M, so it was a full ATX motherboard, not M-ATX. But for 78 or about 80 euros, shall be not a bad option. So, see what is better for you. Again, take into account that it's just about 91% positive feedback, so there might be issues and you need to be very careful with these purchases. Should I build two separate PCs, one for workstation gaming PC and other as a NAS, Minecraft server, etc., or should I get an X99 D8 and two FI2678 with 3 and virtualize everything with Proxmox? Definitely build two different computers and make one to be better for power efficiency and NAS and serving your Minecraft server, and the other one to be less power efficient but higher frequency and better for gaming. QQLT grade CPU easily makes 5 GHz on all cores. Yes and no. It easily makes 5 GHz if you make sure that this lid is removed and you have proper cooling. It is first, and second, if you have motherboard which can actually supply such amount of electrical current. And also I have seen that many people who report that their QQLT is working at 5 GHz, they don't actually test the system stability. The system is crashing every now and then, but for them it's fine. They just reboot, restart their games and keep playing. In this case, I don't consider the system to be able to work at 5 GHz. For me, the system must run all my gaming benchmarks without crashes. There might be some game crash, because some games do crash. But if entire system crashes, no, this system is not stable. Any dual CPU motherboards you recommend for running simple home laboratory? I would suggest to go with a single socket system, way easier to maintain, way easier to assemble, and way much more cost effective. And at the time when you're sick of Xeon X79 or X99, it is also cheaper and easier to sell. On Gigabyte B365, you can also unlock power limit with the program throttle stop. Yes, you can also do that, but the problem is that the settings are still not in the BIOS. Okay, let's move on to the budget LGA 1200 options, if it is even possible such thing as a budget LGA 1200. So, first of all, I would strongly recommend to avoid B460 chipset for two main reasons. First, this chipset cannot overclock memory with the locked CPUs. For example, if you get your 10400, maximum memory speed will be DDR4 2666. And the second, B460 chipset doesn't work with Intel 11th gen CPUs. It is a big shame, and I think Intel made a very big setup here, but it is what it is. Thus, we need either Z490, B560 or Z590 chipset. Most of you probably know, but still, every now and then I get people asking me why the system doesn't boot, and it turns out that they are using F-series CPU with no graphics card. They are plugging the monitor into the motherboard because there is HDMI port, and they believe that it's supposed to work since there is HDMI port. But they didn't read and didn't understand that F-series CPUs do not have iGPU, and it's simply not gonna work. And here is an extra section called Curiosity. I have found these three potentially interesting motherboards, which I might be reviewing on the channel if there will be enough interest. First one is this one, Soyo B560. I'm not sure who might be interested in it, but the price is slightly lower than the rest of the options. It comes with 2 M.2 slots, single PCI Express X16, only 2 memory slots, some VRAM heatsink, and the VRAM itself seems to be not the worst. I don't know if it's any decent or undecent, but it seems to be interesting, so I might be reviewing this motherboard if there will be enough people asking about it. Hi, I have QTG1 in B250 ROG Strix for best result. I have to change TGE motherboard, for example. I have to change the motherboard, for example, Z370. No, you don't have to change the motherboard. If your QTG1 already works on B250 and it does not overheat, your motherboard, just let it work and don't bother. Yes, i7 CPUs are never gonna work in a pair. You need a Xeon E526 or 4600 series CPU to work in a pair. Yes, I also think that this Soyo motherboard looks pretty neat. I like how it looks, but I have no clue if it's any decent. So the second one, which I found to be interesting, is this Maksun Challenger B560 motherboard. It seems to have very similar or almost identical layout to this one. We can see that it's same 2 memory sticks, 1 PCI Express X16, and VRAM configuration seems to be also very similar. The color scheme is slightly different, but if we remove this garbage green stuff around, we can see that the motherboard itself is also pretty black. And the PCI Express X16 slot is reinforced with some metal shroud, whatever. Anyway, this one I have already ordered myself for a review. I'm not sure when it's gonna come to me, if it's gonna come damaged or undamaged, but anyway. Here are some demonstration, and when the motherboard comes to me, I will test it and we will get to know what it is all about. And the last one is this one, colorful CVN B560i. This one would be interesting to those who wants to build an ITX system. It looks very similar to ASRock B560M ITX. ASRock B560. Yes, this one. It looks very similar to this motherboard. We can see that the layout is very similar, and maybe they are copy pasting something. We can even see that the backside of these motherboards. Let me find if I can see backside of the motherboard. Yeah, here I can see a little bit. We also see HDMI display port and then USB 3, USB 2. And here we have basically same thing, but USB 2 and USB 3 are flipped. So this might be very similar to ASRock B560M IDX. Anyway, if there will be enough interest, I will also buy this one for testing, but this one is probably the least interesting for me. Where can I find the presentation you are checking? The presentation right now is not yet available anywhere, but I will publish it on my website and the link will be in the video description, so the presentation will be available after the live stream. So, curiosity sections we have checked out. If there will be enough interest, I will test this Soyo and colorful motherboards. For now, it's only Maksun Challenger, which is going to me. From the CPUs, we have our beloved 10400, and right now it can be obtained from AliExpress for less than 140 euros. I believe that it is a very good deal, especially keeping in mind that this is 10400 and not 10400F. And with this price of 133 and 27 euros, if you buy it by my link, I will get about 9.7 euros as a comeback for you buying the CPU from that link. Hi, I know. Okay, I think these are not questions to me, but if they are, please add me so I can see that it is related to me. Where can we donate? There is a PayPal donation link at the very bottom of the video description, so that you can do. So 10400 would be my favorite. I have assembled about a dozen, maybe a few dozens of computers with the 10400 and 10400F. Every customer is happy and the price is also very attractive these days. If you cannot afford 10400 but you still want LGA 1200, then 10100, which is i3, might be an option, but I think 102 euros compared to 133 euros, and here you get 6 cores, here you got 4 cores. No, I don't think the 10100 is a good purchase. By the way, this 1-star review is some sort of a bullshit. It just writes okay, doesn't specify anything. I know that there are professional AliExpress negative reviewers, that some store is paying some people to buy some stuff from another store and leave them negative feedback for that. Like, it is completely broken, but I know for sure that some people in some stores are doing that. So another option is 10100F, which is significantly cheaper. You can get it for less than 75 euros after the discount. In this case, you do not get iGPU, but it also costs significantly less. So for myself, I would go either 10400 or 10100F. What's my PC spec? Let me show you what is my PC spec. Every time I'm showing it and every time our people are still asking. So here is my PC. At the moment I have i9 10850K. Then I have 64 gigs of memory, 3200. I had it running at 3300, but the system was not completely stable, so I had to go down to 3200. I have a pile of SSDs and HDDs. And my GPU at the moment is Radeon RX 6900 XT. I had to switch my Titan V to the Radeon graphics card because Titan V was not behaving well with Battlefield 2042. So for motherboards, we have Msi Z490s01. This motherboard is an OEM version of Msi Z490A Pro. We can search for this Msi Z490A Pro. So this is essentially almost the same motherboard. I cannot confirm that they are BIOS compatible because they might be not BIOS compatible, but as far as I can tell, they are basically same board. So you can buy this motherboard and your i5 10400 will be able to overclock memory. If I would be buying for myself, and if I would definitely need to buy from AliExpress, I would buy this board. Otherwise, I would buy from my local stores where I can get better deals. And another option would be this Gigabyte B560M. This motherboard I have tested myself. It is pretty okay. VRM is not the most efficient. I would say it's less efficient than desired, but with the 10400 it will be no problem. The prices are not great at all, but if you're limited to AliExpress, that's what you have. I think that 115 euros for this motherboard is kind of risky, especially if you keep in mind that the feedback ratings for the store is not the best. Are you planning to do a super chat on YouTube? I tried to donate via PayPal, but apparently it's not possible from my country. First of all, thank you very much for trying to donate, and yes, I do plan to enable a super chat on YouTube. I have not yet figured out how the taxations are gonna work in that case, and in Sweden taxes are very important, so I don't want to get in troubles for not paying taxes. Once I figure out how that works, I will enable it. Is it a good idea to buy a 12th gen engineering sample Core i9 12900ES QX-Q3 or... Okay, so I have already ordered myself for a review QX-Q3. I can actually take a look in my orders. I hope there will be no confidential information. I actually open it on a separate tab just to make sure that there are no confidential information I'm showing you. But anyway, no, I don't think I need to show this on live stream, but anyway, I have already ordered this CPU myself for a review, and yes, I know that Linus Tech Tips, they made a video about a similar one which didn't work at all, but I need to take my chances. I need to make proper video and see if it's gonna work or not. Before I test it myself, I cannot say it is a good or a bad idea because it is unknown if it is working or not. So, with the motherboards, we have figured out what you can buy for LGA 1200 from AliExpress. Let's take a look at alternatives. Oh, I screwed up. I have clicked the wrong button. Let me go back to the 1200. Here we are, and I need to click this one. So, people are asking me about this i9 10900 QTB1. The CPU is not bad, but it may have problems with the single core turbo boost frequency. On some boards it goes up to 4.4 GHz, but on some boards it is stuck at 4.1 GHz. Thus you may have turbo boost frequency issues with this CPU on some motherboards. And also for 240 euros, buying a 10-core 10th gen Intel CPU, I don't think it's a good idea. For this money, you probably will be way much better with a Ryzen 5 5600X, even if it is a bit more expensive. And if you really badly want something for the LGA 1200, just buy 10400F. You will be better with that one. So, QX-Q3, is it overclockable? I don't know because I have not tested it yet, I can't tell you, but I think it is not overclockable. 11th gen mutants are very much problematic. For example, QVYE, which I have tested on my channel, right now this one, it is costing just under 190 euros, 183. It has 8 cores, 16 threads. But the problem is that on many motherboards, the on-core frequency is stuck at about 1.5 GHz, which is very low, and you're getting very bad memory frequency, very bad memory score, and very big memory latency. So this is a very risky CPU. If you're willing to risk, go ahead, try it, but I would not recommend it. And this one, QV1J, I have not tested it myself, thus I cannot recommend, but we can see that the basic frequency is just 1.8 GHz, so it might be pretty limited. Still, might be worth exploring if you dare to buy from shop 2774012 store, which has 154 followers. So, let's see what other alternatives we have. So alternative would be i5-11400. It costs just a bit more than 1110-400, but this CPU is significantly more powerful when it comes to workload such as rendering, calculations, code compilations, and other stuff. In games, they are pretty much identical if you have memory speed the same. So if you need some extra power and you're willing to pay a bit more, you can get this 11400. 11400 also has a slightly better iGPU. I think it's Intel UHD 750 instead of Intel UHD 630. Again, if you're asking questions which are supposed to be answered by me, please add me so I can spot them immediately. And a few other motherboard options. I'm not sure why I have added this B550M here, probably it was a typo. Okay, one motherboard is already sold out. It is too bad. It was MSI Mag B560M for a good price, but it's already not available. What's available is this ASRock B560M Steel Legend. For 136 euros, we're getting a pretty decent motherboard from a pretty decent store, but I think it is a bit too expensive. I would look for a local deals instead of buying this one from AliExpress. And this one is for AM4, which we're gonna take a look at right now. So let's move on to AM4. Let me see what we have here. So on AM4, I would avoid Ryzen 1600 and 1700 series CPUs if you're buying Ryzen for gaming. If you're making a workstation or a computer to do some sort of calculations or a server, Ryzen 1600, Ryzen 1700 are awesome. For gaming, please don't. For gaming, the lowest Ryzen I would go is Ryzen 5 2600. And the Ryzen CPUs, they do need fast memory, and you better do some manual tuning for your memory timings to increase their performance. For the curiosity, we also have a few interesting options to take a look at. For AM4 socket, it is way less interesting because we have way much more cheaper B550 and B450 motherboards. Still, if there will be enough interest, I will buy this Soyo motherboard with AM4 socket. It is essentially the same as B560 but with AM4. And there is also this one, Maksun, which is also similar to Maksun B560, but it also comes with the AM4 socket. So if there will be enough interest, I will buy either one or both of them for testing. And the last one is this TinyUE AM4 B350 motherboard. B350 chipset is not compatible with Ryzen 5000, thus I find it to be the least interesting motherboard, but it is white and some people are just going, oh, white, I definitely need it. So again, if there will be enough interest, I will review this one as well. Is there some good GPU deal on AliExpress? There are no good GPU deals anywhere at the moment. It is just state of the market. It is very sad, but it is what it is. Nevertheless, we are gonna talk about GPUs a bit later. Best B560 motherboard in VRAM. For best B560 motherboard in VRAM, you need to look for this video. Hardware Unboxed B560 VRAM. So here is a great video from Steve from Hardware Unboxed, and here they do VRAM thermal testing and benchmarking. Follow the link. I can post it in the chat, and you will get information about B560 VRAM. Now let's go back to the original slide and see what we have for the CPUs. So if I would be buying AM4 based system from AliExpress, then I would look at the moment at these two options. The first one is Ryzen 5 5600G. This CPU is particularly interesting because it comes with the Vega 7 iGPU, and that one is semi-decent to do some basic gaming, which means you don't need to buy a graphics card straight away. After discount, it costs just under 220 euros, and I think it is a very good deal. It is also not a hot CPU, so you can cool it down with basically anything. So This would be my target CPU, but it is not for everyone. So another option would be Ryzen 5 2600 if you need something cheaper. I believe that 110 euros for 2600 is not a good price, but if you need something cheaper, then it is this one, because Ryzen 3600 at the moment costs way too much. It costs more than 170 euros and the price is not justified. At this price you will be much better with the 10400 from Intel. What's the best band for back CPU plus motherboard combo at the moment from AliExpress? I think we are just going through best band for back combos and answering the questions, so just follow the stream and you will get your answers. You can also roll back in the stream and watch from the beginning. Have you ever tried using an SSD as a cache for an HDD, something like Intel Optane? Yes, I have tried, but it was a pain and I just scrape out the project and just have my SSD and my HDD. They do their own tasks and they don't overlap. QX-Q3 is locked 4 GHz on all cores. Well, if we're getting 4 GHz on all cores, the P cores and E cores, that's awesome, but I don't think we're gonna get 4 GHz on E cores, which are efficient cores. I understand there are programs that can do that, and I find it interesting since X99 motherboards cannot use Intel Optane. Yes, there are different programs which can do it, but I don't think it has any practical meaning to do that. Okay, so for AM4 motherboards, what I would pick for myself. So if I would be buying from AliExpress, I would probably get just this dirty cheap MSI B450M Pro VDH. It can handle Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7 CPUs with no issues. It costs just 60 euros. It has BIOS from MSI for a Ryzen 5000 series. As far as I know, it also has a BIOS flashback option. The only concern here is the feedback for the store. You may get a motherboard which is in a bad shape, maybe slightly damaged, so just be ready for that. But if I would be buying for myself, I would just buy it. Another option would be a slightly more expensive, but also slightly or significantly better MSI B550M Bazooka. This one costs a bit more than 75 euros, so the price difference is about 15-16 euros. I think the price difference is justified. B550 is much better than B450, but B550 is not gonna work with the Ryzen 3000, 2000, 1000. So if you have Ryzen 5000, I would go with the B550. If you're getting Ryzen 3000 or Ryzen 2000, then I would go with the B450. That's basically it. Pretty simple choices and pretty good prices for AM4 motherboards. For the alternatives, we already seen the Ryzen 5 3600. Right now the price is not good at all. You will be much better with the 10400F. And for the motherboards, there are two more options. One, we can get this Gigabyte B550M Aorus Elite for about 90 euros. I think it's a bit overpriced, but it is an option from a store which has good positive feedback. And we also get this Asus TUF B550M Plus. I think the price is even worse, but the motherboard is not bad. Anyway, I would just get this MSI for 75 euros and be happy. Of course, this ASRock is also an option, but the price is also not that great. Let's close this one down and see if I have missed something. No, that's probably it for the AM4 motherboards and AM4 platform. Let's see if I get any more questions. What do I think about the 12th generation from Intel? Well, I think I have very mixed feelings. First, I'm happy that Intel is finally back to challenge AMD. And second, I was expecting much better from Intel. I was expecting that they're gonna beat Ryzen 9 5950X by at least 15%. In reality, they lose sometimes, win sometimes, power consumption is horrible, motherboard is expensive, memory, DDR5 is super expensive, so it makes no sense to use DDR5, just use DDR4. Like, As I say, very mixed feelings. Happy that Intel is finally competing, disappointed that it is not competing good enough. What do you think about newest Ryzen 5 Pro 5650G for 260 euros to play with integrated GPU until GPU prices go down? Well, I would just go for the 5600G, which cost under 220 euros. Like, you are not going to benefit from a 5650G because the iGPU is identical as far as I know, and if you get a slightly faster CPU, it doesn't help you if your GPU is the bottleneck. What about 2700X and Ryzen 3 3100 and Ryzen 5 3500X? Those are all viable options, but unfortunately the prices are not attractive at the moment. For example, we can search for Ryzen 3100. Like, why would you pay the same price as Core i5-10400 for Ryzen CPU, which is slower and has only 4 cores? I would not do that. Then Ryzen 2700. This one might be an interesting option, but I would probably skip it and either buy 10400 or 5600G. And 3500X, this one has only 6 cores and 6 threads. So again, you're paying the same price as Intel Core i5-10400. So very questionable, very questionable. Let's see, what is the explanation for the crazy price on i7-5775C? Is it already an antique or because of the good iGPU? Last year it was 80 euros, now it's 200 plus. Well, for 2 reasons. First, because people keep buying them. And for the second, because the stock is going down and there is not many of them left, and the Chinese just want to get as much money as possible. So the people who are desperate to buy this exact CPU are gonna pay their scalping prices. Now, let's go to the interesting subject, the graphics cards. Unfortunately, the graphics card prices are still pretty horrible, and just last week I was buying some new graphics cards for my company to be able to build some computers. I paid 650 euros for RTX 3060 Ti, 350 euros for GTX 1660, and 250 euros for GTX 1650. Unfortunately, these prices are no longer available. As soon as the GPUs go in stock, they are just sold out immediately, and I was lucky to buy one of each. So what I would say, do not buy a new graphics card unless you really need to buy a new graphics card, or unless you really have money to spend. Like, don't try to starve yourself to buy a new graphics card. The second one is, please do not buy China branded graphics cards, because these are not new graphics cards. We can take a look, for example, let's just search GTX 1060, what we can find here. And here is, for example, this one. Have you ever seen this graphics card? Do you know what it is? No, but they claim that it's original GTX 1060 fully new, blah blah blah. Do you think it is actually a newly made GPU die? Definitely not. This graphics card has salvaged the GPU die from some dead graphics card, or maybe from a dead computer or from a dead laptop. Then the Chinese made a PCB and slapped a new cooler on it and calling it a fully new original graphics card. Moreover, if we take a close look at this GPU cooler, it's the most horrible GPU cooler you can get. It is like a CPU cooler which is not stack fins. Let me try to find a picture. Stack fins cooler, or how to spell it, I'm not sure. Let me try to explain what I mean. Let's see if I can find nice images for a comparison. Okay, so this CPU has stacked fins, and basically we have these very thin plates which are put together, and very often they're put together on a thermal pipe. Like, for example, here. And there are also coolers which are having cut down pieces, like on VRAM, for example. Let's see. Like, no, okay, like this one, for example. It is thick fins and they are not stacked together. They just take a giant piece of aluminum and cut here pieces. And this graphics card is using such cooler, which is horrible. The GPU is going to sound like a helicopter, it's going to overheat, and moreover, the GPU die is not new, it's salvaged. So please don't buy these graphics cards. If, and I'm saying very big if, you really need to buy a graphics card right now, first check your local market. Often you can find GPUs in your local stores which are not available online. Just go into a computer store and ask them if they have something. I was able to buy graphics cards 2 times like this. I go to online store, they are not available there. Still, I go to the physical store and I ask them if they have it or no. And one time they said, yes, we have, and I bought one. Another time they said, no, we don't, but then I look on the shelves and there are RTX 3060s. And I say, and what's that one? I would like to buy it. And I bought one RTX 3060 for an okay price. And lastly, if you can't find anything and you really badly need a graphics card from AliExpress, what I have found is that GTX 1060 5GB right now is the best option. Yes, I mean 5GB, not 3GB and not 6GB. GTX 1060 5GB was a China-only version of GTX 1060. It performs somewhere in between 3GB and 6GB, and it has somewhere in between the memory buffer. 3GB is way too little these days, but 5GB is enough. So, for example, from this store, which has pretty decent feedback, we can, let's see, for the 3GB version, they are asking about 200 euros, and this one is 1065GB. They're asking 235 euros. I believe this is the best value option from AliExpress at the moment. If I would be buying graphics card, I would be buying this one. Another option would be the 1066GB, but 300 euros for 1060. No, I'm not paying that. Let me try to answer some questions. 650 euros for 3060 Ti is not that bad. No, it's not bad at all. That's why I bought it. Seeing all this scarcity, I'm thankful I bought my RX 480 for 86 US dollars, although I went another 80 to replace the heatsink. Well, even if you add 86 plus 80 and you're getting 166 US dollars, it's still a very good price for RX 480 according to the today's market. R9 3080 4 gigs for $60 used. That's a very good deal. Cheap cards use extruded heat sinks. Well, I guess it means that the heatsink is pretty bad. Yes, that's pretty bad. So are these graphics card fan worse than budget X79 or X99 boards on AliExpress? Both sound kind or similar to me because of reusing chips is something. Well, it is a different thing. The graphics card is the graphics card, the motherboard is the motherboard, because on the motherboard you still install genuine Intel CPU or AMD CPU and you can validate that CPU, but inside the graphics card the GPU die is hidden, GPU memory chips are hidden, and if there is a tiniest smallest crack on one of the GPU memory chips or in the GPU die itself, you will get artifacts on your screen. Or if Chinese did the soldering not the best option, then some of the memory chips may lose contact with your PCB and you're getting artifacts on your screen again, so it's pretty different. Anyway, GTX 1060 5GB, that's the best option in my case. Then you can also consider the 3 gigs version if you're not playing games at high resolution and with high textures. And the last resort would be 964 gigs and 962 gigs. Let's take a look what we have here, if they are still available at all. So this 964 gigs from Colorful. Colorful is not a known brand, but at least it's not some unknown garbage which does not even have a brand. They are asking 160 euros for a 960. Ooh, that's way too much, but if you really badly need 4 gigs graphics card, that's probably the best option what you can do. And let's see if we can find 960 with just 2 gigs of a video memory, if they have it. No, this one is 4 gigs as well, and this one, okay. So 962 gigs, 135 euros or 130 euros after discount. I believe it is still too expensive, but if you really badly need a graphics card, I guess you don't have any other option. So again, same thing. You can see everything is sold out except of 1060, 3 gigs, 5 gigs, and 6 gigs. So even these graphics cards for these prices are getting sold out from AliExpress. Should we go for 12400F or wait for next gen Ryzen considering budget builds? I can't tell you because 12400F is not released yet, but if Intel is going to release the budget-friendly 660 chipset and 12400 is delivering according to the expectations, then I would definitely go with the 12400F. It seems like a good deal. And someone got AMD R7 270X for 39 euros. Yes, that's also a good deal. I don't remember how much video memory that graphics card has. I think only 2 gigs, but still, that's a very steal deal. Have you looked at any of the water cooling parts on AliExpress? I saw some brands like blah blah and blah blah. They are a lot cheaper than fitting from EKWB. Yes, I have looked at the water cooling, but I'm not really interested in water cooling and I'm not interested in the custom loops. I believe that you need to spend your money on performance of the computer and not into the looks, because ultimately when you game, you look into the monitor and not somewhere under your desk and like, ooh, how many RGB FPS I have there. Okay. Recently I changed my motherboard to X99 RS9 and encountered some problems. I keep getting video memory full warning and got a lot of unidentified list of drivers in device manager, which doesn't occur before. Well, in this case, you first need to reinstall your Windows. Second, install your graphics card drivers, and third, install all Windows updates, including the optional updates. Now, the last graphics card option would be that I would recommend is, of course, the beloved Ryzen 5 5600G with the Vega 7 graphics card. We can take a look at how Vega 7 performs. It is nothing to be excited about. But if we go to iGPU section, then we can see how it is performing. So, iGPU performance, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, we can see that it performs somewhere close to AMD RX 550, and that one performs somewhere close to GTX 1050. So the performance is at the pretty low level, but it is enough to sit and wait until you can get a graphics card. That's all I can say about the graphics cards. Unfortunately, the market status is just horrible, and it is what it is. If you need a graphics card, you pay the scalping prices, because I don't think the situation will be any better in the at least next 3-4 months, maybe even half a year. Thanks for helping me building my Dual 2678v3. Greetings from Brazil. You're welcome. Greetings from Sweden. So, the last section in my thingy or my guide, my presentation will be RAM and SSDs. But before that, I need to take some drink because my throat is getting a bit too dry. Okay, I am back. And regarding Chinese RAM and SSDs. First, you need to understand that even if you have two visually identical memory modules or two visually identical SSDs, what you have inside is completely random. Chinese can use different SSD controllers, different flash memory chips, and different DDR4 memory chips on exactly the same memory sticks and exactly the same SSD drives. In this case, you can buy two identical memory sticks, but your memory is not compatible with each other. It is a shame, but it is what it is. So with this in mind, I would of course first look for local deals and only then go to AliExpress. But if I would have to buy something from AliExpress for SSD, what I would do, I would pick KingDian SSD and I would go for NVMe SSD because the speed is much better and the price is also more attractive. So we can get a 1TB KingDian SSD for about, how much they ask? About 86 euros. Not bad, but in local Amazon, I can find SSDs for about the same price. So AliExpress is only if you don't have any local good deals. And 512 gigs is available for about 47 euros, which is also not bad, but also not spectacular. If your motherboard does not have M.2 NVMe slot or M.2 NVMe slot is already occupied, then you can take a look at the KingDian SATA SSDs. These are slightly cheaper, also available in 480 gigs capacity and 1TB capacity. The price is slightly lower. Personally, I have got tested about 5 of these KingDian SSDs, and all of them performed almost identical. None of them failed so far, but I did not open any of them to see what kind of controller or flash memory chips we have inside. So it was only using it, testing with Crystal Disk Mark, Crystal Disk Info, and other SSDs. So if I would be buying from AliExpress, I would be buying either this KingDian SATA SSD or this KingDian NVMe SSD. Then for the memory, I would go with this Clisre DDR4 memory, which is unbuffered, non-registered, non-ECC memory modules. And if you're buying for X99 platform, you need to say this to the seller and ask to give you 16 banks module variants. I also always ask to give you identical modules. If you are buying 2, 4 or more memory modules, always ask to give you identical ones, because if you do that, then you can use this discussion later on in AliExpress dispute if something goes wrong. So what do we have for the prices? We can get 8 gigs memory sticks shipped from China for about 25 euros. Again, I can buy DDR4 memory for about the same price here on Amazon, but if you need to buy from AliExpress, this is one of the best options I could find. Another interesting option is Samsung memory, which is ECC registered, good for Xeons. I think I have mixed links, I need to fix it. So this Samsung memory is also a good option. What's good here is that you can buy 2333 for your Xeons for 25 euros for 8 gig sticks, or you can pay a bit more and get a 2400 memory stick. As far as I know, this is genuine Samsung memory modules. They can be overclocked, they can also be tightened on memory timings I mean, and they are 99% compatible with the X99 platform with the Xeon E5 CPUs. So this is what I would buy from AliExpress if I would have to buy SSDs or memory modules. Would get Crucial BX500 and avoid AliExpress for SSDs. I had bought some because they were available in M.2 SATA size that I needed, and 2 out of maybe 6-7 already failed. Will never buy again. Yes, absolutely. I would avoid buying SSDs and memory from AliExpress if possible, but if I'm forced to buy from AliExpress, I would buy this KingDian. So, and one last note that I would like to say is please do not buy memory which is for Intel only or for AMD only. Those memory sticks are inferior, you will have problems reselling them later on, and even though they might be obtained for a bit cheaper from AliExpress, I still do not recommend buying them. With that, that's all I have collected from the AliExpress deals. If you have something interesting, then please post it in the chat and I will either answer or take a look at it. If no, I have here got email from AliExpress with some promo codes. I have no clue if it is gonna help someone or no, but I'm going to publish it online either way. So if you're interested, feel free to download this PDF file and try to scavenge some promo codes to buy some stuff. If you can get a few euros off here and there, well, I'm happy for you. Otherwise, I don't exactly know what I can do with these promo codes. Let's see. Don't buy cheap SSDs. I have had many of them fail. Get at least Kingston, Crucial or Micron. Yes, I totally agree with these, but if you're forced to buy from AliExpress, then that's what I would have bought. If I, for example, go to Amazon, I can search for SSDs. And here I can buy a Kingston 480 gigs for about 45 euros. These are Swedish kronors, but it's you need to divide by 10 and then you get euros. This is a way much better option than Chinese SSDs, but not everyone has access to Amazon, so it is unfortunately what it is. They were KingSpec brand, I think, with an Assassin's Creed image on them. That's why I recall this bad situation. I'm always feeling bad when I remember these and the fact they could die. Is it worth to buy cheap AliExpress M.2? No, it is not worth if you can buy something on your local market, but if you don't have anything or everything is completely overpriced, then you don't have any other option but buy from AliExpress. What about the WD-SN550? Yeah, this SSD, it's not the best SSD, it's not the fastest SSD, but it's a totally fine SSD and I have used them in my budget builds. No complaints so far. This is a pretty okay SSD, even though it's not the best. 1 terabyte option is available for about 80 euros. 500 gigs option is available for about 40 to 43 euros. Yeah, it's a very good deal, I would say. Okay then, since there seems to be no more questions, no more interesting suggestions, let me check my Discord. Maybe there will be some more input. Doesn't seem like that. Well, then, thank you everyone for joining today. I am going to publish this presentation on my website. Link will be available in the video description in a short while. The promo codes will be uploaded at the same place. So if you're interested to get or try to get some discount with these promo codes, feel free to download it. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope it was interesting. I hope I have helped someone. Bye bye.